Good morning, children. Welcome back to the social session. Children, in the previous lesson, we have seen about the national movement in the colonies in China and Nigeria. But what about the national movement in our own country? Even we were under the colonial powers like Britisher. We fought against them. They ruled us for 2 centuries, 200 years they ruled. We have seen about the national movement in class 8th. You remember, children? The early phase and the last phase we have seen in 2 parts in class 8th. So here today we shall learn about the national movement in India. It's a partition and independence. That is the period between 1939 to 1947. One of the most important period this is. This is a period when the Second World War started, and this is the year when the India attained its independence. So let us see at the final phase of the Indian national movement, where we try to understand what are the situations that led to the partition of the country. Partition means, what do you mean by partition? India got divided into 3 pieces. I think you know it. One is West Pakistan, India and East Pakistan. So this division of the country is called as a partition. So what are the reasons for the partition of the country? The people of the country had faced very difficult question and had to accept very difficult answers also in these years. They faced difficult questions and they also had to accept difficult answers during this period. Whether the Indians should support the war which began in 1939 or not was also a difficult question. So how this was met, let us see in today's class. As we have read already in the previous lesson that Second World War has begun in 1939. When the war started in 1939, most of the provinces in India were governed by the Congress ministries. From where these Congress ministries have come, I'll tell you. But most of them were governed by the Congress ministries. The British government had agreed to give Indians the right to rule themselves to some extent. How? Through passing a law in the British Parliament. They have passed an act called as Government of India Act 1935. What this act tells, that you can conduct elections for the provincial assemblies. That is nothing but our self-rule gets started to some extent. So according to this, elections were conducted in some provinces and the winning parties could form the government. Whoever wins in the elections, that party can form the government. However, the right to vote was given to very few percentage of the population. That means, for the state assemblies or the provincial assemblies, only 12% of the population was given right to vote, and for the central province, only 1% of the central assembly, only 1% of the population was given right to vote. Voting right was given to very few people, not to everybody. But now, everybody who is above 18 years of age will be given the right to vote. But then they had given only to few sections of the people. So when the elections were held in 1937, as per the Government of India Act 1935, out of 11 provinces, 8 provinces were won by the Congress. That means, in these 8 ministries or in the provinces, there will be a Congress Prime Minister who will be supervised by the British government. This kind of setup was made under the Government of India Act in order to give a little self-rule for the Indians. The World War was going on because it started in 1939, so the World War was going on. Now the leaders had to face a difficult situation. What is the situation? Should they help the British in fighting against the Germany, Japan and Italy and other Axis forces? And Britain had decided that India will participate in the war on their behalf. without asking the Indian government or the Indian leaders, the Britain unilaterally announced that India will participate in the war. There were reasons both for and against the supporting the war. Whether we should support the war from the Britain side or whether we should support the war from the Germany side. So there are to and fro arguments were there. Most of the Congress leaders were against to the Hitler, Mussolini and fascist ideology. So they opposed supporting to the Germany, and they were in favor of the Britain Congress. They were in favor of the Britain to support in the war towards the Britain. They wanted to fight against the fascist drive which tells to conquer the other sovereign nations. But what the Britain has done, children, Britain also has occupied another country like India, and they were ruling us. Most of the Congress leaders were against to this idea. The Congress expected its double standards in this one, and they were at least asking to make a promise that at the end of the war they will be given the freedom. The British realized that, but at the same time it was hard for them to accept the reality, and they were not in a position to dismantle the empire which they had built for years. They know that this is also a fascist ideology. What Britain is doing is also a fascist ideology. What Germany did on Poland is a fascist. If Britain has done on India, is it not a fascist ideology? Occupying another country for the sake of its raw materials, that is also a fascist ideology. This is a double standard of Britain. But they were not in a position to accept or to dismantle the empire which they had built for many years in India. And there were many political parties in Britain at the time of the war. An all-party meeting, government has headed a all-party meeting. It has conducted a all-party meeting led by Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Britain. And he belongs to the Conservative Party. Winston Churchill belongs to Conservative Party, and they were in power. And they had passed a resolution that they need to keep these empires, these colonial empires, for as long as possible. That means they were not in a soft corner towards India to give any kind of freedom. In comparison to the Conservative, Labour Party was more willing to help India in its freedom. Labour Party wanted to give freedom to India, whereas Conservative Party wanted to keep the British Empire as long as possible. This is the situation there. The British were willing to give a dominion status under the British Queen. What is this dominion status? That means a partial freedom will be given, but whereas regarding the military, regarding the foreign policy, again the Queen will be the head. That means partial freedom will be given to Indian. That is a dominion status which they have proposed. The British Parliament has proposed a dominion status. They wanted to give it soon after the war. But Congress wanted a promise from the Britain for a complete freedom. Congress did not accept any kind of dominion status. They want complete freedom. That means even on the foreign policy, on the military, okay, we can control our country, we can protect our country, okay, such kind of freedom we need. The Congress also demanded an immediate national government should be set up at the center. The British has objected this by saying that they need to protect the interests of others also. What is this interest of others? Why the British government has objected the Congress demand of establishing a national government? That means that the implication is, it implies the Congress doesn't represent all the interests of the country. Who are those all in the sense? Whom the Congress is leaving out then? The British felt that the Congress is not representing the interest of the Muslims. That is quite clear. That's the reason they said that the British required to protect the interests of those people also. Those in the sense Muslims' interest also. So they did not consider that Congress represents the entire Indians. The government has got a special wartime powers during the wartime, and they have to maintain the law and order to be able to focus on winning the war. For this, anyone who opposed the government were put in the jail. Immediately they were jailed, and they were put in the jail for a long time without taking them to the court. If you take him to the court, you have to prove the charges. Either you will be released, or you will be, if your charges were proved, then you will be in the sentence in the jail. So this trial was not done at all. For many years you can be put in the jail. People were not given the freedom of speech. It was during through 1940 and 41 very little individual satyagrahas were organized by the Congress party to pressurize the British to promise freedom once the war ended. But no major protest was launched, as many important leaders were already in the jail, including Gandhiji was also put in the jail. And the Congress was upset that British government has refused to promise them full freedom. They said that we cannot give you the freedom. For that reason they were upset. As a decision of the British government not to give freedom, the Congress ministries have decided to walk out of the provinces. All the ministries had resigned, which they got elected in 1937. In 1939, they had resigned and came out of the Congress ministries. So who really represents India? Let us see in the next class. What is the Pakistan resolution? How Pakistan got created from India? We shall see in the next class. And the role of Muhammad Ali Jinnah and Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh, RSS. These two roles also we shall see in the next class. Thank you.